This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and today a really exciting mega celeb for me, the hairdresser to celebs, Sam McKnight. Now, I'm very excited about this because I don't know about all of you. I bet lots of you are about my age. And you will remember that incredibly iconic picture of Princess Diana with the slicked back hair, which made her suddenly look so sculpturally beautiful. And if I think of Princess Diana, it's perhaps that picture more than any that I conjure up in my head. And that is down to Sam. So, Sam, welcome to the podcast. It's really lovely to talk to you. As now an avid gardener, I'm longing to hear all the things that you like. But tell us, first of all, about your whole life as a hairdresser.
Oh, where to begin? I'm from a fairly small coal mining village in the hills in South Ayrshire in Scotland. Well, it's actually East Ayrshire in the split. But I'm from a coal mining village, basically. I grew up in the 60s and I was born in 55, so figure that one out. And I went to teacher training college after school and hated it, hated every minute of it. I mean, my family didn't have any money, so it was kind of, my sister will kill me for saying we were poor, but we really were poor, but we didn't know it because everyone else was, so it was fine. I didn't know people didn't live in council houses. That's the background I come from. But we had an idyllic childhood in the countryside in the south of Scotland. I was just there this weekend. I still go back and I love it. It's beautiful. And I actually spent 2 mornings in Prince Charles's Dumfries house going around the gardens, which was an absolute joy. It's incredible. It's absolutely amazing what he's done.
Except he's now King Charles.
Oh, King Charles, sorry. I'm sure he'll forgive me for that.
We all forget that little bit.
Yeah. Charles will do. So I still have my roots there, so to speak. And I came to London. I left college. I hated it. I left college in, I think, 74. And I'd been there for a couple of years and I really, really didn't like it. My friends were out having jobs, making money, and I still was a student. And I was a window cleaner. I worked in a sock factory. I worked in a jeans factory. I carried a stepladder around with me, rain, hail, or shine. I think I got 20p a house for 6 windows or whatever, just to get some money. And my friends owned a hairdressing salon and I started doing odd jobs for them just to make some money. And I kind of found myself helping out in the salon and really by accident fell into doing hair and really enjoyed it. Yeah. And then I went on holiday in 75, 76, around then to London. And then I got the bug. I always wanted to move to London after that because the 70s was pretty depressing in UK. It was very much time of change. And kind of looking back, it was that kind of gap between the 60s and the 70s. The 60s were black and white, as they say, and the 70s was kind of emerging into a colourful world post-war. So I fell in love with the bright lights of London.
And you were sort of early 20s?
Early 20s, yeah. So I came to London. I got lots of jobs. I worked in a fantastic little salon in Miss Selfridge in Regent Street. I don't know if anyone will remember that.
Yes.
And then I moved to Elizabeth Arden on Bond Street. And then I saw, as I was looking through Vogue magazines and admiring all the gorgeous David Bailey and Norman Parkinson, beautiful, colourful imagery, I saw that most of the hair was being done by people from a salon called Molton Brown, which we now all know as products. but it was really the hottest salon in London in the late 70s. So I went and I blagged a job there, and I had 3 blissful years there. And they were the first hair people to do natural products. And they really were natural products because there was no preservatives in them. And I mean, they used to stink after a few weeks because they didn't last on a shelf. So you would have to replace them. It was really groundbreaking. It was incredible.
Yeah.
And
God, I didn't know that. I really didn't know that.
We weren't allowed to use hair dryers. We dried everything with a towel and with our hands. They used to call it finger drying, which I can still do to this day. I can get your hair dry in about half an hour from wet to dry. But it was an amazing learning experience of how to use your hands without any tools, of actually physically working the hair with your hands. So that in 1980, I started doing a few shoots through the salon. Because back in the day, this industry was very small. It's not the huge machine that you see now on social media. It was a tiny industry. It was very niche. And there were very few people who did hair and makeup for magazines. I think just before that, models did their own hair. I think John Frieda was one of the first guys. And then my generation came along. And I think, it's all about timing. I think I saw that this world was emerging. And when Michael, the boss at Moulton Brown, wanted to stop us all from going out to do shoots for Vogue, etc., and come back and work in the salon because we weren't making money for the salon. And he was absolutely right. But I saw a new world emerging, and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to not go back to the salon. I'm really enjoying this creative world of being in a studio, creating images, creating Vogue covers.
With much more of a buzz. I can really kind of, I always long to go to one of those catwalk things, having done it in my 20s. But I can imagine that it has that real frenetic, fantastic energy, which a hair salon would never have that.
Well, it does, but it's a different kind of energy. I mean, you've got 12 clients coming in and out of your chair every day, so it's like a machine. Whereas the photo shoot or the shows is a much more collaborative, creative process. Not to say that cutting someone's hair isn't creative, but it's a different kind of creative environment. And I love the collaboration with the stylist and the hairdresser, the makeup artist, and the model, and the photographer. So it was about spending a day creating really beautiful images. And did you say you did catwalk when you were in your 20s? Is that what you just said?
No. No, sadly not. I'm tall, but I'm not slim, and I never have been. So I'm 5'9", although I've shrunk in recent days, like that in recent years. No, not at all. I loved going, and I just love that kind of vibe, and I have never been back since. But
well, it's very, very different now because where there would have been 100, 200 people at a show back then, there's now 2,000-3,000 sometimes. We did a show for Balmain a couple of seasons ago. There were 6,000 people in an amphitheater. It's pretty incredible. It's like a rock concert.
Yeah. And there are pros and cons to that, I imagine. But it's exciting. But take us through how you met Mario Testino and I never know quite how to pronounce his name, but Patrick
de Marchelier.
That's it.
Patrick de Marchelier. Patrick was really one of my early mentors. In 1980, after I left the salon, I spent a couple of years in this kind of very small beginnings of an industry in London. And then I got booked in a job in New York, and I found myself an agency in New York. And I realized the business already existed in New York where it didn't in London. So there's a real big New York energy in the 80s because New York had been bankrupt in the 70s, and in the 80s it was coming out of this fug. And I ended up spending the best part of the next 18 years there, from 82 till 2000. So I started working with Patrick for Vogue in the early 80s. We both had the same agent, so I would get booked on lots of jobs. And I went on to work with Patrick for the rest. I mean, he passed away a couple of years, sadly. So up until then, and we had a fantastic relationship. And we went through the 80s, Patrick and I, And I wasn't the only hairdresser who worked with him. There were a few of us, but I was part of that crowd. He was the Vogue photographer. And we did lots of British Vogue covers, American Vogue covers, and we were both there watching the birth of what's now known as the supermodel. So we'd have Christy, Linda, Naomi, Cindy all arriving as kind of 15, 16-year-olds on what's called a go-see for the photographer to take some Polaroids of them and see if it was working. They were children, basically. And so I kind of grew up through that era. And by the end of the 80s, Patrick had been asked to shoot Princess Diana for British Vogue. And he asked me, myself and Mary Bloomwell to come along, and she agreed. And although we didn't know, we turned up for a shoot not knowing who it was going to be. And she came bouncing up the stairs. It was 1990. It was the summer of 1990. And this sort of leggy blonde comes sort of bursting in with a huge smile, sticking her arm out straight away for a handshake and sort of disarming you. And we all just fell in love with her, like millions of people did. And all I can say is she's exactly as she is in those images you see, And that day, we did some portraits for Vogue, and she was wearing a tiara. She had to wear a tiara in this picture. And she had the big fluffy 80s hair, which actually, when you look back at it, looks pretty amazing. But at the time, it was 1990. The 80s were over, and we were Vogue. So we were kind of anyone who came through our chair, we had to Vogue them up, so to speak. And so I made her hair look short because in 1990, everything was the big flouncy 80s were gone. And the sort of slick, sharp business 90s had arrived already for us. And so I made her hair look short with the tiara. And after the shoot, she said, "Oh, I love that. What would you do with my hair if I said do anything else?" I would cut it all off and start again and keep it slick. And she let me do it on that day. And I mean, she was really good fun. She was great. I mean, and then she asked if I'd go on a trip with her. I think her first trip, if I'm not wrong, I think it was to Pakistan. And so I did that. And then we spent the best part of 7 years working together after that. I kind of took care of her hair. And I mean, I was traveling a lot, so there were a couple of other people who I would get to take my place if I wasn't there. And I think I managed to juggle 7 years of that with my other work. To this day, I don't know how I did it. But I loved it. She was such a wonderful person. And it was, it was I realized at the time, it wasn't one of those things that I realized what I had till afterwards. I realized at the time how special this was. She was a wonderful woman, and we got along really well, and she was really funny, and we used to laugh a lot. And if I was doing her hair on a Saturday afternoon, we'd be watching Brookside Omnibus. So it was it was very, very special, and we got along really well. I think when you are in that kind of close proximity to someone, touching them, and you have to get along with people or it doesn't work, And we went on to shoot some really incredible images over those 7 years, and I got to go to the most incredible places, whether I got to go to her charities in various countries and got to go to Mother Teresa's in India and just magical times. They were magical times.
Yeah. And so then, gosh, where do you go from there? I mean, I know you've also worked with, so many other people. Kate Moss is a sort of resonant one for me.
Yeah.
I imagine that must be that must have been the most extraordinary experience. And it's sort of like how you can get out at the end of that must be really tough.
Well, luckily, it was pretty traumatic for everyone really, but it was hard that it was really sad. It was so public and so kind of many terrible things written, and in the back of your mind, all I remember is the good person, But she wasn't my only client. I had many other clients. I was still working, and Kate had just started, and all that time I was doing shows for Vivienne Westwood and lots of different people. So I worked with Vivienne for 30 odd years till she passed away. And then I went on to work with Karl Lagerfeld at Chanel, doing all all the Chanel stuff and the Fendi stuff for 12 years. So I've had an incredible working life, working with incredible, interesting, intelligent, diverse, iconic people that I've been really lucky to collaborate with.
Lucky man. So I guess everyone's thinking, why is Sarah talking?
Why am I here?
I could happily chat all day, but we better get on. So the reason I'm talking to you is that you are now a passionate gardener, and I know you've relatively recently moved from quite a small flat in Maida Vale to a really quite sizable garden in North London. So will you just talk a little bit about that, and then we'll come on to the gardening side?
Well, there's one correction there. It's actually 13 years. but
Oh,
but that's okay. It feels like a couple of years. But yeah, I lived in a flat in Maida Vale for years. And I used to go to Regent's Park Rose Garden of a nice summer evening, afternoon, and I'd sit on a deck chair in the Rose Garden and read a book. And I started to think, God, I wonder. But don't forget, I was traveling all the time with work, so a garden hadn't actually entered my head. And I thought, I wonder if I could have my own little garden, if that would work with me traveling. So I started to. The seed was sown, so to speak, and I started to look around. And it took me a couple of years, 2 or 3 years to. I was looking in Maida Vale in different areas, but Maida Vale was incredibly expensive, and other areas around the gardens were more like patios, shady patios, and so I started to look further north, and I just by accident online found this one that had a huge garden. It was 120 feet long by 40 feet wide, which for inner London is pretty big. And it was a football pitch, basically. It was green with some shrubs on the edges, and that the house hadn't been done for 30 years. It was a little bit uh, worse for wear. And the family were moving out. The lovely family who lived there were moving out. And I thought, you know what? I mean, it was the garden that drew me in, to be honest. I mean, it's the house, which I'm still in, is far too big for me. But I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to take this on as a project. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the house up. I'm going to have fun with the garden. I'll, make it a little hobby. And, I'll give it 6 years, then I'll move on. So 13 years later, here I am, absolutely addicted to gardening. And the garden is now getting really overgrown, but it changes all the time. And I absolutely love it. I've loved every single step of the way.
And do you think, I mean, it's sort of, I don't want to ask cliche questions, but like obviously getting your scissors out for hair, are you a great pruner or not at all? I mean, what's your favorite sort of thing to do in the garden?
I think my absolute favorite thing has got to be sowing seeds. I mean, the joy of sowing seeds, watch them coming out. I mean, I lost so many of them this year because of the really bad weather.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a disaster, but you kind of learn to roll with that, don't you? You kind of, it's okay. It'll be all right. There's always next year. And I filled those spaces with other things. I probably ordered a lot of things from you to replace them. But yeah, how I did it was I made a few mistakes. I did not have a clue. I did not have a clue what I was doing. So I planted a few things. Some of them died, and I thought, oh God, I can't. There's a lot of studying to be done here. I don't know about soil. I don't know about light. And I bumped into Joe Thompson at a friend's party down your way somewhere. It was in Kent, and Joe and I got talking. We hit it off, and Joe agreed to come and help me do a plan. And Joe has become a great friend since then. So Joe helped me do this plan. And Joe kind of was advising me this, and I kept saying more, no, put more planting, more planting. She was kind of horrified to start with. Actually, she did magnificently well. She did it. She kind of put up with me, and I'd be calling her at all hours of the weekend and saying, "What do you think about this? What is sending things backwards?" And do you know what? Joe taught me a lot. Joe taught me things, and then I learned names of things. I love taking pictures on my phone, because don't forget that time was the kind of the beginning of the people taking images, posting them on Instagram. So I would just take pictures, and then I'd Google it and find out what it was called. And I think that has had an incredible effect on my memory, because I am very aware. My father had dementia, and he had it for a long time, and he got it in his mid-50s. So I'm always aware of that. And after a few years of I guess it's opening up new channels in your brain, learning new things. I think that has helped me enormously to just the new thing to learn. I mean, I read a lot. I'm still very active with work and all that, but I think that opened up channels that were unused. That's what it felt like anyway. And I think, and I honestly, the whole thing has been a massive learning process, and learning what works in what season, which side of the garden to plant it, how many hours sunshine there's, so I'm not wasting quite so much money on things, and yeah, so it's been. I think the learning thing for me is what I take. Well, the learning and the meditation, because it's a meditative thing for me. It's a solitary hobby, occupation, whatever, because my work is completely surrounded by people, and lots of people, lots of personalities, lots of egos. This is solitary. So it's a time and I can do things whenever I want. I've got two local guys who come and help on a Monday. Because I travel so much, I can't keep on top of it. So what I was very aware of, that it didn't become a chore that I would start to hate. And luckily, I can afford to have a couple of guys come once a week, so they keep on top of things, and it leaves me time to plan, sew, plant, potter. One of my favorite things is go up and tie the climbers in when they need climbing in, that kind of thing, because I want to enjoy my garden. I was very aware of it not becoming a competition to work, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, do you have a greenhouse? So you love sewing.
I've got a shed. I've got a very small shed up the end. I've got a small, I think it's like 9 foot by 9 foot addition onto the shed that's glass with shelves. It's not a big greenhouse. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shelves, wide enough to have trays of seedlings on it. And there's tomatoes in there on the ground at the moment. And yeah, I mean, it's great.
And do you do edibles as well as?
I do. Yeah, I'll tell you what I've got right now. We're mid-September, right? And it's not been a great year for the edibles. The tomatoes are great because they're inside. The cucumbers actually are fine. I only have about 4 squash. I've planted so many squash plants. I've got about 4, but there's a butternut squash that's about that size. So
you would say about 40 centimeters long type thing? Yeah.
Yeah. Looks amazing. Leeks, kale. I've got apples, pears. Didn't get many plums this year. I've got quince, which I love, and the blossom is really beautiful on the quince too. God, what other veg have I got? I tend to plant things that I use a lot.
Yeah.
So lots of herbs.
And what about ornamentals? So I know you love roses, and as I mentioned at the beginning, I think you love dahlias. But so maybe can you give us your 5 favorite flowery flowers?
I'd have to say number 1 would have to be a competition between roses and dahlias. I mean, roses, I just love. My garden is full of roses. I'm probably keeping David Austin and Peter Bills in business because I get a few new ones every year. I've got far too many. I can't buy any more, and then I do. And the whole garden is surrounded by climbing roses, and up the back of the house and up the front of the house too. Love that. Also, Favorite type? Oh God, so many. My favorite of all is Munstead Wood. It is incredible, but they're not that great anymore. I bought some new ones and they didn't do so well. So I treasure the two really good ones that I have and long for it to come back. Love that. I love my Generous Gardener too. I love that.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's very good,
it's
isn't it?
great. Yeah. And I love Gloire de Dijon. I love Lady of Shalott. I mean, there are so many. There's so many. And I love dahlias equally. I love the length of the season of dahlias. And my favorite dahlias are the big dinner plate ones. I love all the Café au lait, the Café au lait royal, all those. Love all those. And I love the really gaudy cactus ones, the labyrinth ones. I mean, I love the blousiness. And I think what Joe taught me was I could have some color almost every month of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So we start with the crocuses and the primroses in early, and then we go into daffodils, then tulips, then the roses come with the perennials, and I've got lots of hardy geraniums, lots of
Oh, yeah.
those. Roseanne does really well in my garden, and I've got lots of pink ones. So I still don't know what everything is called, but I love lupins. But recently, my lupins just get eaten. I'm going to try really hard this year with the lupins, but they just seem to just not last in my garden. I love all the clematis too that starts, and then we go on to when the roses are gone. There's a little gap, isn't there? There's a little bit of a gap, and I haven't really figured that out yet. That's something I have to.
So like some half-hardy annuals. Or also, what about some alliums, some later alliums? Some of the ones that... Do you like alliums or not so
I
much?
love alliums. Yeah, I just bought a whole load of alliums. So are there some that come later then?
Yeah, well, I mean, a nice late one actually is Christophii.
I love that. Yeah, love that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit later. And then the latest of all is that tiny little one called Sphaerocephalum, which means round head.
Oh
And
God,
that's really little.
I'm gonna check that out. Yeah, yeah.
Good. So it sounds like all the things that you love are pretty showy and flamboyant, which I'm not surprised by. Do you pick as well? Do you put things all around the house?
I do. I do very, very much so. I love that. Yeah. My friend Mary Greenwell is a very good flower arranger. So Mary, I've known for years. Mary's a great makeup artist, and Mary comes and picks loads of stuff and puts them in vases and makes these sort of big flamboyant displays. Mine are a bit more small, a bit smaller with like sweet peas and roses or dahlias and salvias or something. It depends what's in season.
Yeah, great. Good. Oh, well, how nice. And so it's for the kind of solitude and the peacefulness, but also for the flamboyance and abundance that you garden.
Oh God, absolutely. And it's somewhere for my dog to run around too, which is great. Although he has been digging holes in the lawn this year, but you kind of just have to let that go, don't you?
You do. And pots?
Oh, lots and lots
Yeah.
and lots of pots. Lots and lots of pots, yeah. I did a load of trailing petunias this year, but the slugs got them. So I then had to do a double order. I had to reorder. But they're still looking good. It's mid-September. They're still good. They're still great. I've got loads of dahlias in pots as well on my terrace. I mean, I've got too many pots. I could probably edit that, but I never do. I always say I'm going to edit it, but I never do.
And do you water them or do you have irrigation?
No, I water the pots. I don't have irrigation in the pots.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. Oh, let's do that this year, and then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. We always...
It's gone. Yeah. You know what? I don't stress myself out about it. If something doesn't happen or whatever, it's okay. There'll be something else. It's fine. I learned to accept the losses or the things that don't happen. It's okay. Not beat myself up about it. It's fine.
Good. Oh, well, it's so nice to talk. Before I let you go, will you just tell us a little bit about any kind of exciting things that are coming up?
Well, we have lots of fashion shows to do. Then we have a big Christmas season with our hair products because we also have a hair product company. And funnily enough, the hair products the packaging is all based on colors of flowers in the garden. So it was an incredible inspiration from that. And the fragrance comes from the garden too. So there's a kind of beautiful symbiotic relationship there. And we've got lots of very, very cool, interesting things coming up in the next few months.
Good. Oh, well, let's keep in touch. And will you come back and chat about it all again in the future?
I will. And I always want to come to one of your classes, and I will do that.
Good.
I will do that in the spring. Yeah.
All right. Great to talk. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. Thanks very much for listening to Grow Coquita Range, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and with Sam McKnight, the fabulous hairdresser for lots of people we love and admire. And he loves gardening, so how nice was it to chat to him about his garden too. Next week, I'm joined by Adam Nicholson, my husband, and we're going to talk about hedges. Now, some of you may think, oh, hedges, that sounds rather dull. But actually, of course, hedges are unbelievably important to the health of our planet, our country, our wildlife, biodiversity, climate change. They do so many crucial things. And so whether it's in our countryside or, if possible, in our gardens, hedges are the way to go. You'll learn more about it next week. See you then.
You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.